Welcome to part 3 of the weight painting series. In this one I'll go over some extra tips and tricks that might come in handy throughout your weight painting misadventures. Let's start with a couple of operators. The first is the smooth vertex weights operator. It does what it says, and I find it very useful in complex areas. Let's say you found an area where the weights ended up going a bit all over the place. Make sure the bones are posed so you can see the bad deformation you're trying to fix. Go in vertex masking mode with V and select the vertices where you want to smooth the weights. Then run the operator and play with the settings. By default, it will only smooth the active group, which is usually not what you want. Set this to deform pose bones. If it didn't smooth it enough, I recommend you increase the factor to 1 before increasing the iterations. Increasing the iterations will cause your weight islands to grow to neighboring vertices with each iteration, which can end up turning your characters into pudding. Next is the transfer weights operator. Remember in the last video I mentioned that having a base mesh can make your life easier? Well, that's because I can transfer weights from that base mesh to any other clothes that this character might have. Let's say I've just spent countless hours masterfully weight painting this base mesh so it deforms perfectly. I can now unhide the clothes of this character again, select the armature, then select the base mesh, then finally select the clothing that I want to transfer the weights to. Then enter weight paint mode and run transfer weights. Go in the operator settings and change the source layers to by name and the destination layers to deform pose bones. You can try out different vertex mapping settings to see which one gives you the best results. I find that the nearest face interpolated option gives the best results most of the time. Now, don't expect the results to be flawless. This usually does require some cleanup, but it can still save you time, especially if your character has a variety of clothes. Next, I'd like to show off a small add-on I made called EasyWeight. You can find the link in the description. This add-on just does a few small things to fix some annoyances I run into, including some I've already touched on. You don't need this, of course, but if you want the benefits I'm going to talk about, you can simply go to this download button, download it as a zip, then in Blender go to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons, Install add-on from File, and browse the zip you downloaded. So what does the add-on do? For starters, if you set up the shortcuts that I did for the 1 and the 3 keys in the previous video for brush switching, with this add-on you can remove those. Once you install the add-on and restart Blender, it will auto-register hotkeys for the 1, 2, 3 keys for the add, subtract, and blur brushes. It will also change their cursor colors, which is handy when you have to work in older files or someone else's files where the brushes are still on their default settings. The second thing it adds is a pop-up menu that you can use to replace the weight paint context menu. By default, this context menu is in the W key or right click depending on your settings, and it only contains sliders for values that you can change with shortcuts much faster, so it is redundant. The add-ins page explains how to replace that menu with this custom one. Go in the hotkey editor again, and find the shortcut for the old context menu. Then replace the operator name with this, object.custom weight paint context menu. And that's it. This menu provides quick access to a selection of brush settings, weight paint settings, overlay settings, and armature display settings. The only brush settings are front faces only and the fall off shape. Note that using this menu to change the brush settings will change them for all brushes, not just the current one. As for the weight paint settings, auto normalize and X mirror should be familiar. Multipaint is an option I will talk about in a bit, and weight cleaner is a new functionality that comes with the add-on. Enabling this option will run the clean vertex groups operator after every brush stroke, which is useful for avoiding rogue weights that are sometimes created because of auto normalize. The final major addition from this add-on is the toggle weight paint mode operator. This is useful if you find it painful to enter weight paint mode sometimes. In a worst case scenario, you could have a dark object in wireframe mode while your armature is hidden in a disabled collection. In this case, to enter weight paint mode and be able to start painting, I need to change the object's display type to solid, enable the armature's collection, unhide the armature, select the object, enter weight paint mode, and change my shading settings to white. And I need to undo all of that when I leave weight paint mode. So that obviously gets exhausting pretty quickly, so the operator I mentioned takes care of all of that in one go. Once again, let's add the shortcut. In my key map preferences, I have tab for pie menu enabled, which frees up my control tab shortcut, so I will be binding this operator to control tab. I go under 3D View, 3D View Global, scroll down to the bottom and add a new shortcut with the operator name object.weightPaintToggle, and bind it to control tab. Now I can just select an object and press control tab. My armature will be visible and in pose mode no matter what. If my object was in wireframe mode, it will now be in solid. My shading settings are automatically changed to white. And when I press it again, everything is restored to how it was before. Great! That's it for that add-on. Next, I want to mention a couple of weight paint mode options that you might find useful. Multipaint and Lock Relative. When Multipaint is enabled, it lets you select multiple bones and see and paint their combined weights. This won't work well if your weights aren't normalized, but if you've been following along, then they probably are. I find this useful for hunting down rogue weights or adjusting multiple areas at once. It has a couple of limitations though, which is that you can't add new vertices or fully remove vertices from any of the selected groups. Lock Relative is a feature meant to be used in tandem with vertex group locking, which I haven't talked about before. With bones selected, you can press K to bring up the vertex group lock spy menu. Locking a bone's vertex group will make the bone display with a red tint. Now remember, for auto-normalize to function, it needs to affect vertex groups other than the currently active one. However, if a vertex group is locked, it cannot be edited, and therefore auto-normalize can't do its job. This is where the lock relative weight display mode comes in. With it enabled, your weights will display as if the locked vertex groups did not exist. This can be useful if you have an area of weights that you are confident about and you know you don't want to affect, so you can lock those vertex groups. And if you have locked vertex groups and are using auto-normalize, displaying weights in this way might feel more intuitive for you. Alright, with these bonus tips, I hope you feel a little less lost, less annoyed, and more efficient when it comes to weight painting in Blender. Keep in mind that the purpose of weight painting is to achieve good deformations, but achieving good deformations is almost never done purely with some good bones and good weights. For further learning on the more general idea of character deformation, I recommend you to learn about the authoring of shape keys and how they can be activated using drivers. Beyond that, there are also a set of handy modifiers in Blender that can be used for deformation in various situations, such as lattice, mesh deform, surface deform, and perhaps most importantly, corrective smooth. If you want to achieve the best deformations possible, I advise you to look these up and play around with them. And with that, I am all out of wisdom to share, although I'm sure I have missed some things. You can feel free to let me know in the comments if you have any more weight painting workflow or character deformation related tips. Thank you for watching and have fun!